Mother Teresa had something to say about love. She said that love is the fire that burns within one's heart. So let's stand and sing this congregational song that I wrote from the coffee book of Mother Teresa. Take the top coffee table book. Wonderful to see you all today. Good morning, community of Wilmington. It is such a blessing to be here today. I now live in Richmond, Virginia. Before we start, just to give you an update, because I did leave Western Montana and moved to Richmond 18 years ago. And it is in Richmond that I started to study to become a licensed Unity teacher and met Reverend Nikki Golden at Unity Village. At the time, she was studying to be a licensed teacher. We had some classes together. She went back to Honolulu, I went on my way. And then a few years later, I heard the call to ministry, I heard the call for a while, finally followed it, and entered into the school and found out that she and I were in the same Unity Urban Ministerial School together, and she graduated, was ordained in class a year ahead of me. Anyway, I thank Nikki and Reverend Mindy for inviting me here today, inviting me into their home, which is just lovely. And here to your church home. At my home church of Unity of Bon Air, we do book studies a couple of times a year. And a few years ago, we did a study of Brene Brown's book, Daring Greatly. Now, she's gone on to write a few more books, and she, of course, was featured on Oprah, so you may have heard of her. She calls herself a storyteller, which she is, and a researcher, and she's a social worker. And in her book, Daring Greatly, she speaks to this idea of the power of vulnerability and how we can go out of our way to try and keep ourselves from showing vulnerability to others. We resist our vulnerability and we put on armor, we try to cover it up. And she talks about that is a link to an underlying sense of shame. Now, a definition of shame is a belief that one is inherently flawed. Now, we know that that's an error of thought. We know that there is one presence and one power, and we are the divine expressions of the Most High. Sometimes we have to change our thinking and change our life to grow into that realization. So my message today is about letting go of the shore, just like the song, taking risks and daring greatly, even when we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and even if we feel vulnerable. And we do find times of feeling insecure and vulnerable. And that isn't the problem, though, feeling vulnerable. But if we let those negative thoughts and feelings hijack our sense of our divine nature, then that becomes a problem. In John 10:10, the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, it says, Jesus said, "The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." He showed us the way to have life, have it abundantly, and taught us that this inner living Christ within gives us the direction that we need to live an abundant life in spirit. And when we do that, we are focusing on spiritual gifts instead of limitations. So I don't know about you, but I know that there have been times in my life when it took me a while to follow that nudge, a direction that I was hearing. Like, it was probably 10 years ago when I got a message on the white stone, the ceremony that we do in January on New Year's. I got the word minister. And I did everything in my power to make that mean something else other than entering ministerial school. However, I was happy being a licensed teacher and a singer-songwriter, and I really feel that we're all ministering in our lives. We may not all be called to become a minister, but we all minister. So I followed that call, and here I am, and 2 weeks ago I was ordained, and I am so grateful for everything that led me on the step to doing that. Now, in Brene Brown's book, she refers to Teddy Roosevelt's speech, The Man in the Arena. And I recommend that you look that up and read it. It's a pretty powerful speech. But the point of the speech is where he says, don't listen to those critics outside the arena, but listen to those who are inside the arena with you. That might be your spiritual community. And also, we have an arena within our own consciousness, and in our consciousness we have those critical voices. In our consciousness we have those supportive, loving, truth thoughts. And so those are the ones we want to pay attention to. But there's a process that we go through in order to affirm those truths and really embody them. And in order to embody them, we need to use the power of our minds and use affirmations and denials and deny the power of those negative critics. So sometimes we have to clean out the container in order for those new truths to stick. In Mark 2:22, it is stated that no one pours new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be ruined. So that's just like our mind and our consciousness. We create a space for those truths by releasing the worn out error thoughts. Now believe me, I've had to do this in my life, and I couldn't stand before you today as a Unity minister had I not let go of how I saw myself before. I had to expand my vision of myself and to know that I could be a Unity minister. And 18 years ago or so, I left a very comfortable, beautiful life in northwestern Montana and moved out to Richmond, Virginia. Because my partner at the time had a job offer, and I had to make a decision to go to Richmond or to stay there. And what I realized is once I certainly appreciated the life I had, but I also knew inside that there was more life to be lived. There was more treasure in where I was going. So I took that step and I moved. But it was a difficult one, and I had to, period of time, mourn the loss of my former community. Karen Drucker also wrote a book besides the song we just did, Let Go of the Shore, and in her book she says, the more I thought about it, I realized that life has many deaths, both literally and spiritually, and that these births and deaths involve letting go of the shore that we have known and setting sail into new uncharted waters. And ultimately, to do this means trusting that we are okay, that we have what we need, and that we are safe. Trusting, yes, that we are divine. It takes risks in letting go of that safety net to live this full and abundant life. And we cannot receive if our hands are full and clutching the old. So I invite you to think of a time, maybe you can relate, that a time in your life when you were holding on hard, you had a difficult decision to make, but you knew that it was the right decision and you needed to make a change. Maybe it was retirement. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was giving up an addiction, moving to a new city or town, a house, something that you took steps for this better version of yourself, and yet had to let go of some things in order for that to happen. And just think about where you are now once you've had completed that process and the blessings that unfolded as you took that journey. So right now I invite you to use your note paper that you have in the bulletin. For right now we're going to do a little exercise, and I would like you to kind of go into a meditative state and ask yourself, what is that thing that you've been putting on the shelf or maybe you've put off, but you know you're feeling the nudge, you're feeling that divine discontent or this longing. It's a desire that Spirit has placed in your heart. When you have that in mind, just jot that down. Ask yourself this question. Is there anything in my consciousness that is blocking my receptivity to this? And if so, write down on your paper, starting a sentence, I release, and then just list 2 or 3 things that come to your consciousness. I release, and just write it down. It's kind of like a 6th month after the burning bowl ceremony review, okay? So what am I ready to release and let go in order to live my abundant life in spirit? One of the tools that I use when I'm releasing is a little chant that came to me. And so I'm going to share that with you while you write your releases. I release and I let go. I am in the flow. I release and I let go. I am in the flow. What doesn't serve me, I gently send away into the source of good without delay. I release and I let go. And I will use that and continue as in meditation, just continue with that chant. It helps me to stay in the present and release the past. And now that you have your list, I want you to think about if you ever hear any of those critical voices outside the arena that says, oh, are you sure you want to do that? Or, I'm not sure I can do that. Or, there's not enough time, I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too that. Then we're going to use those denials and say, no, this has no power. I affirm that I can do this and I will. And so if you'll say that with me now, yes, I can do this. And
yes, I can do this. And I will.
Thank you. Again, together. Yes, I can do this, and I will. Thank you. Now, back in the 80s and 90s, I facilitated some ropes courses and participated in firewalking, and eventually became a facilitator of firewalking. And when we do the firewalk, we do a lot of preparation for that, very sacred time of releasing that certain things are possible even though our mind thinks it's not. And so when we prepare ourselves, we see ourselves on the other side of that fire. So when it comes time to walk, we're focused. We've already seen ourselves there. We've already felt ourselves on the other side of a fire, so that we don't focus on our feet and how hot the coals are while we're walking across. And it's like life. When we keep our eye or our eye single, we keep focusing on the guidance and the vision of Spirit, then that will become manifest as we stay in our strength and keep working toward it. So on your list, I'd like you to think about 3 things that you can do today toward that realization of your goal or your desire. Just write down 3 things. And then tomorrow you can rinse and repeat. Again, what are 3 things I can do today? What are 3 things I can do today? Until all of a sudden, before you know it, you're there. Near the end of my schooling, Reverend Nikki had put a challenge on Facebook, and she said, what if you do this as a practice for 21 days, that everything in the universe is working for my good? So I took that challenge, I was working on it. Everything in the universe is working for my good. And no matter what happened, what circumstances came before me, that I would affirm that and remember it. So it came time for me to fly out to Detroit for my license and ordination interview. I got to the airport, and at the airport gate, the gate agent says, your flight has been canceled, and so we're booking you on everybody that was on there, they just automatically booked us on another flight. A little bit later, I looked at my ticket and I was like, well, I only had a 30-minute layover, so I don't think I'm going to make that. And I was like, oh, I can't believe it. And then I was, wait a minute, am I not practicing that everything, to remember that everything is working for me, everything is working for my good. There is only one presence and one power. So I said, what if I treat this situation from that? So I went to the gate agent and I explained the situation about I'm going to miss my connecting flight. And she said, well, there's a flight to Detroit a couple gates down and it's full, but I will put you on standby. So I went down to the other gate and waited. And she said, oh, and if you don't make that flight, I'll go ahead and put you in this other flight and another connecting flight. We'll get you there today, no worries. So I sat and waited at the other gate, and I was called onto the flight, onto the last seat. You know, the one back by the restroom, right? Very last seat on the plane. But I got to Detroit, and it was 2 hours earlier than my originating flight, and it was direct, and I didn't have to pay extra for that direct flight. And I was like, wow, yeah, everything really is working for my good. And then I was like, my luggage didn't make that flight. And I started, you ever do this? So then I'm seeing myself the next day, what if my luggage doesn't come and I'm wearing my street clothes for my interview? Oh, that would be terrible. And it's like, wait a minute. Everything is working for my good. So I went to the baggage agent and she gave me an overnight bag and said, well, if we aren't able to deliver your bag tonight, here's an overnight bag just in case. So I went on to the hotel and the bag came. But one of the most important lessons in that whole experience, everything is working for my good, I also got that I needed to change my message that I was preparing for my interview, which was about letting go, letting God and being in the flow and being flexible and going with spirit instead of resisting circumstances, but embracing change. One of last year's daily words said this: success comes when my divinity and humanity act together. What is success? I realized defining it for myself is the first step to experiencing it. When I get recognized for something that I have achieved, I celebrate my success. If my goals need to change midway through, grace intervenes and carries me in a new and better direction. I sense something more powerful at work than my personal vision and effort, the presence of spirit. I am most successful when I trust the invisible force to work alongside me and guide my path. Ultimately, success is a partnership with Spirit. I do my part and remain open to what Spirit tells and shows me. I am most successful when I allow my divinity and my humanity to act together. That's bringing your vulnerability, taking risks. So let's say this together. I am most successful when I allow my divinity and humanity to act together. I am most successful when I allow my divinity and humanity to act together. Thank you. Now, in conclusion, I'm going to share with you a Zen story. And this is a story about a monk. And in these days, ancient days, the monks would travel by foot. And he was traveling to negotiate and do some commerce with the neighboring town. And he would always walk along the riverbank, because that would take him to the next town. And it was a journey. But it was really rained a lot. There was excessive water. Things were slippery. The current was swift. And as he was walking along the path, along the river, he lost his footing and he slipped. And he grabbed a hold of a tree root or a tree branch as he was falling into the river. And so as he was falling into the river and trying to pull himself back up, he finally, out of exhaustion, had to let go. And he fell into the water, and then his first instinct was to try and swim back to the shore, but it was too swift. Finally, he surrendered and he turned over and floated on his back to the next town. And when he got to the flat, calm waters, when he got out of the water, he realized that he was in the town that he was trying to go to, but he was there a day earlier than he had planned. So friends, isn't that just how our life is? Sometimes we don't know what's best for us. If we just turn it over and let Spirit be the wind in our sails and let the Spirit carry us, then we will get there. We will sail to new lands. So I just leave you with this challenge to surrender, let go of the shore, dare greatly, and you will live that freer, fuller life of abundance. Namaste.